Hello and welcome to Why Is This Happening with me, your host, Chris Hayes. I'm willing to bet that before November of 2022, you had never heard of a tech nonprofit called OpenAI, and you'd probably never heard of an individual named Sam Altman. Now, maybe you work in tech and in AI and you had, but I think the vast majority of people hadn't. I'll cop to, I had never heard of OpenAI. I had never heard of Sam Altman. And then they introduced this new generative AI chat feature called ChatGPT. And, you know, there's only a few times where there's been a kind of tech sensation, like the introduction of that. It became the fastest growing app in history. It catapulted them into fame, both OpenAI and Sam Altman. Sam Altman is now one of the most famous people probably in America and in the world. He was in the White House, I think the second day of the Trump administration. He was recently in Saudi Arabia during Trump's trip there. OpenAI is at the vanguard of what has been this kind of revolution in tech in which hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars have poured into the development of artificial intelligence based on large language models. And, you know, depending on who you ask, it's either at the cusp of the most transformative technology in all of human history that will inalterably catapult us into a strange new future in which humans enjoy like the leisure they've been promised since the dawn of the industrial age, when Marx was writing about how if we capture the surplus, everyone would be fishing and critiquing art, and Keynes was writing about the economic prospects of our grandchildren. What will people do when they don't have to work all day? That like finally this will happen. We finally got the technology. The ones in previous eras were wrong, but now we finally got the technology that will allow that. So that's one way of looking at it, right? The total transformation of human activity through the portal of a generalized intelligence. Or one person described it to me and said, imagine the nuclear arms race was happening in the 1940s and 50s, but it was just a bunch of Silicon Valley. It was just a bunch of CEOs who were developing the nuclear weapons. And they were competing with each other. How would have that gone? So one is endless surplus and bounty. The other is the destruction and end of the world, in which a kind of like, you know, Frankenstein's monster 2001 Space Odyssey HAL figure takes over the world and destroys humanity as we know it, enslaves us, etc. Or the third thing that I've heard as a possibility for this is like remember when there were the like non-fungible tokens, the NFTs, and like that was going to be the future, and there's like this Web 3.0, and then it was just like no one, like remember when Zuckerberg's whole thing was we're rebranding the company and remaking the company around this new technology, which is the metaverse. Everything's going to be the metaverse, and that lasted for like maybe 12 months, and now we shall never speak of it again. There were people who were buying, like, I remember I reading an article about like Snoop Dogg sells waterfront metaverse property for 7 figures or something. I was like, I don't even understand that sentence, but like all of that is now just a dream. It's gone. So maybe it'll be that. Maybe it's just all absolute hype. Those are kind of the 3 different ways that people sketch this future. And I have to say, I truly don't know which it is. Like, I really feel I'm trying very hard these days to get my arms around this. And I don't know, but depending on my mood or what article I read, I can be convinced of any of those 3. So I thought it'd be a good time to spend some time on today's program speaking with someone who spent years reporting out a book about OpenAI. The book is called Empire of AI. It's out now. Dreams and Nightmares in Sam Altman's OpenAI. And the author is Karen Hao, who joins me now. Karen, great to have you in the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
So there's so much to get to here, like in the generalized AI discussion, the specifics of OpenAI. So I just want to start with filling in some of which I've learned from your book, but for the listeners who have not encountered your book, just filling in like the OpenAI backstory, because it really was one of those things that like from day 1 to 2, like no one knew what OpenAI was or what they were working on or who Sam Altman was. And then all of a sudden it was like, they were going to control the world. And I've never really encountered anything quite like it. I feel like Google is the closest to it. But even Google felt like a slower burn, to be honest. I was there. Totally. I was there when people were looking for search and people started word of mouth being like Google. Whereas ChatGPT really felt like from one day to the next, no one knew about ChatGPT, and then everyone knew about ChatGPT. And what I would love for you to start with is, who started OpenAI? How did it start? What was its mission at the beginning? How did this thing come into being?
Yeah, totally. So OpenAI started as a nonprofit, and it was co-founded by Sam Altman, who we now all know as CEO, and Elon Musk, which is kind of an interesting piece of the history that people aren't as familiar with. And they originally started as a nonprofit because they were trying to position themselves as an anti-Google. So Musk at the time had become really deeply obsessed with this idea that AI was going to destroy humanity if the development of the technology fell into the wrong hands. And he specifically believed that Google was accumulating a rather large outsized influence on AI talent at the time, particularly with the acquisition of DeepMind, and that was going to lead AI development to be almost purely done with profit-driven incentives, and that was what was going to lead to the demise of humanity. So Altman and Musk join forces and say, well, the best way to make an anti-Google is to just have a nonprofit that's going to be a fundamental AI research lab doing the development of this technology purely without commercial interest, purely for the benefit of the public. We're going to open source everything, make everything transparent. And that is how it originally begins.
How genuine do you think that was on Musk's part? I mean, it's a little hard to square the current version of Musk and the behavior I've observed from Musk, which does not seem particularly altruistic. With this sort of like, he just had this genuine belief that this was a scourge to humanity and we still need to start a nonprofit.
You know, I think every major Silicon Valley titan always thinks of themselves as being altruistic and also is deeply competitive and also has a deep-seated desire to have a lot of influence and control in the world, you know? So I think it kind of all blurs and blends together. And so do I think Musk believed that he was doing this for altruism? Yes.
Right.
But of course there were other but of course there were other things at play. And it was the same with Altman. I would say the same exact thing about him. He also believed that this was for the benefit of humanity. But there were other strategic factors kind of in the air.
Right. So that the Google concerns, you've got the sort of, if this is done by a private firm solely pursuing profit motive, it might lead to something that's genuinely catastrophic for humanity.
Yes.
And also, maybe we don't want Google to get to grab the brass ring.
Exactly.
Sort of side by side. Now, Musk, around when was this that they had these conversations and they started it?
This was in 2015. Yeah,
okay.
That they started having those conversations. And then at the end of 2015 was when they announced OpenAI.
And what's Altman's background at that point, and how does he even know Musk?
Altman was the president of Y Combinator, which was at that point already the most prestigious startup accelerator that you could join in Silicon Valley. If your startup got into YC, you were kind of set. You didn't get a lot of capital. The YC promise was interesting. They only gave you a little bit of capital, but you tapped into a huge network, a very influential network that would then rapidly accrue you more headlines, more capital, more talent, so on and so forth. So he was an investor. He was a startup guy. He came up through Silicon Valley.
He was in a Y Combinator class. He had been in.
He was in the inaugural Y Combinator class, and
with a friend of mine, actually.
That's wild. Yeah. And that's where he met one of his most important mentors, Paul Graham, who was the original founder of YC. And then after he launched his startup and did it for 7 years, it failed. But then Graham thought, you are one of the most unique people I've ever met in my life. I want you to take over YC. And so Altman, at a very young age, in his early 30s, ends up taking over, either late 20s or early 30s, ends up taking over Y Combinator. And at that point, when he took over YC, he started, the startup that he was originally working on, it was kind of a Foursquare competitor. It wasn't so ambitious and big picture vision.
I've seen video of him giving his pitch deck, which is like,
yeah,
we never know. You might be right near your friend who's a block away, and then you find out, and then you're both there. You can go get a drink, and it's like, it's so funny because it's like it captures a certain era
Yeah.
of like innocence in tech. Like,
Yes.
hey, it's not like we're replacing all of you disgusting humans.
Yeah,
It's like, hey,
exactly.
maybe you meet your friend for a drink.
Yeah, amazing serendipity. Yeah. And basically when he becomes president of YC, he starts realizing he really starts kind of stepping into the shoes of the typical Silicon Valley titans of, let me paint you a sweeping vision of the future, and this is why you need to put a lot of money in XYZ, whatever thing that I'm investing in.
I think it's worth noting here, and this is something that does come through in your book about the culture of Silicon Valley. When you talk about painting
Yeah.
the sweeping picture, that in some ways, because of the models of venture capital, it rewards grandiose storytellers
Absolutely.
more than it rewards anything else in some ways. Like there's lots of people who are great engineers. I mean, they're and brilliant engineers, and you've never heard their names. They're not the
Yeah.
people that who are household names. The household names are people who have a particular talent
Yes.
for sketching a vision of the future that people hear and they're like, I want to put billions of dollars towards that.
Yes. And I wouldn't say that Steve Jobs invented or was the origin of this culture, but certainly Jobs was the
Yes.
most iconic storyteller that everyone in the Valley looked up to. Like, so I worked in Silicon Valley myself, and I remember the startup that I worked at, everyone always talked about how storytelling was so important, how like our CEO was a really great storyteller, and that's what made him a really good CEO. That's how people discussed it. And it was because Jobs was just so successful at executing that storytelling talent and showing all of these young founders in that generation what it could be like, how much transformative power you could kind of accrue by painting those sweeping visions.
Now, in the case of Jobs, I would say that he also had a talent for product development that was unparalleled. And in some ways, the story of Apple was the pairing of his ability to do both. Like
Yeah.
it truly is the case that
Yeah.
the products they developed were genuinely transformative, unlike anything else, totally changed the world. I think, the iPhone more than anything is one of the most transformative devices created in my lifetime. So he had kind of both. I think one of the questions we're facing now is like, I feel like with a lot of Silicon Valley is like, is this all just like, am I watching Music Man and the
Right.
guy who's like
Right.
doing a song
It's
and
all
dance, or
story,
like,
no substance.
right? Can they produce? And on that back end, I want you to talk a little bit about ChatGPT
Mhm.
because it is transformative.
Mhm.
And how did that happen? And what made it happen? Who developed it? And how did it kind of come out of nowhere?
It's so interesting because as someone who was covering it, it did not feel like it came out of nowhere. It felt like there was a really clear kind of slow boil up until the release of ChatGPT, to the point where like I have to admit regularly now that when people ask me, what were you doing during the ChatGPT moment, I don't remember because I didn't consider it to be a moment. Like when ChatGPT first came out, I was like, oh, seen that, like whatever. And that was a huge miss on my part, in that I didn't understand that even though the technology had previously existed, the fact that you now slap a super easy and free user interface on it completely changes the game. But I guess to go to your question of where did that come from? I mean, what I write about in the book is how a lot of people now associate all of AI with ChatGPT, but it's actually a very specific pathway of AI development that OpenAI decided to take. So early in its nonprofit heady days, it was trying to figure out, how do we become a leader in AI because we want to beat Google? Like, how do we surpass Google as this scrappy nonprofit? And what they hit upon was this thesis: oh, we need to scale existing AI technologies to an unprecedented degree as fast as possible and continue scaling it faster than anyone else. And in order to do that, we are going to need an extraordinary amount of data, to the point that we will be scraping the whole internet, and an extraordinary amount of supercomputers. We need the largest supercomputers that have ever been built in human history. And when they hit upon that, they then transitioned into a nonprofit with a for-profit arm underneath, because they realized there's no way we can raise the amount of capital that we need under this nonprofit. So let's create this other fundraising vehicle where we can promise investors returns. And then they set on this trajectory where they then partnered with Microsoft, who was going to build them the supercomputers. And then they started scraping all of that data and just glomming on more and more pools of data on their servers for training these models. And in that time, in the AI research world, because ultimately OpenAI at its core, it was still a research project at that point. In the AI research world, there had been a debate about how to actually make AI progress. Like what are the things, the shapes of the technology that you should be building?
What's the path forward to get us to the next level?
Yeah, like what is the thing that we should be scaling? That was the question at OpenAI at the time. And within the field, there was this hypothesis that maybe language models could be a fast way to get rapid progress, because language, the theory argues that people communicate all the knowledge that they ever have through language. So if you can take all of the language from the internet, it should be able to give you a pretty good approximation of all of the knowledge in the world. There's a lot of debate about that. I mean,
but this was the theory,
but
right?
this was the theory.
Large language models, because you have a base, you have a data set that exists that you can go and scrape.
Exactly.
We could talk about the copyright stuff in a second. And we have a technology that can suck in a lot of data, use the connections between those data points to create neural networks that can kind of predictively find patterns.
Yes.
I mean, I'm oversimplifying how a large language model works.
But no, I mean, that is exactly what it is. Yeah, like you pour all this data in, and then the large language model starts to learn the patterns of the human language, and then it spits it back out at you. And you can use those generations to test whether or not it's actually starting to learn sophisticated concepts about the world, because it's spitting it out in a way that is human legible. And so that's the research case. But it also there's a great commercial case for it, in that when you create systems that can talk to you, I mean, what a compelling product.
This to me is, so there's the thing about ChatGPT, there's two breakthroughs happening. There's the fact that they bet on this scaling issue. We're gonna get more compute than anyone, and this is just a numbers problem. Like, basically, if you get enough data and you run enough GPUs, you can get to something like the human mind.
Yes.
The human mind is just like a massively parallel processor. It just, because of its cellular structure, is beating our computers. But if we just do the electronic version that gets to the scale, you'll produce stuff that's like what humans do. That's basically the theory, right?
That is the theory. Exactly.
And then they started going about doing it, right? The biggest data set, the most amount of GPUs, they're training the data, they're scraping it. But to me, part of the genius is the interface.
Yeah.
Because if you go back to, this very famous logician, mathematician, computer scientist, and philosopher named Alan Turing, Alan Turing came up with this thing when he was thinking about artificial intelligence called the Turing test.
Yeah. And
the idea of the Turing test was like, you can call a machine intelligent if you can chat with it and not know it's a machine.
Yeah.
And basically they took the Turing test and they were like, we're going to use that as our main interface. Right? I mean,
yeah, well, there were a couple of reasons that they did that. First of all, science fiction was a really big reason. Altman had always been really obsessed with the movie Her, and this idea that you can chat with a model and through a language interface. I think in part because he felt like this is the clearest articulation of what AGI could possibly look like in a void of articulations about what this technology is and what it should do. Also, it's not a coincidence that ChatGPT was not the first chatbot that started creating waves of hype around AI development. The very first chatbot to do that was Eliza, and it was built in the 1960s. 50s, sorry. Maybe around like late 50s, early 60s. And that was built by an MIT professor named Joseph Weizenbaum, who was actually doing it as an experiment to see how easily can humans be duped when a computer starts talking to you into believing that there might be intelligence hidden beneath the surface. And he was really alarmed that actually it was a much simpler system. It wasn't
much like
yeah, it wasn't statistical calculation, scraping the internet. It was rule based. It literally followed a method of Rogerian psychotherapy
Yep.
where you say, hey, I'm feeling bad today. And then there were these rules behind Eliza that
Yep.
would say, why are you feeling bad today? Like it would just copy and paste what you were
Mhm.
saying and then flip the you to the I and your friend to my friend and your whatever dad to my dad. Like
Yep.
it was following all these rules. And people back
It's like a
then,
wall that you're like you're hitting a tennis ball off of, basically.
yes. And people back then were declaring that AGI is already solved. I mean, they weren't using the term AGI, but they were effectively saying that AGI is already solved. We will not need doctors anymore. Psychotherapy is going to be automated. Teachers will be replaced. All jobs will go away.
Wow.
And that obviously sounds incredibly familiar in the moment that we're in. But what it really hits upon the fact that it's not a coincidence that Eliza and ChatGPT function similarly. And when you think about, like, I was watching a lecture from a computer science professor who was saying at Notre Dame, who was saying humans have anthropomorphized anything and everything for thousands of years.
Yep.
And there is something deeply, it taps into our psychology to have things talk to us. So I think that's why OpenAI ultimately chose an interface that was language based.
And what's amazing is so much of the discourse around it recalls the Oracle at Delphi, like this oracular consultation where you go to the Oracle and you say, what should I do with my life? People like asking, even the other day where we were doing a story about the Elon Musk's AI model Grok, which is embedded in what used to be called Twitter, and it had started spouting all this craziness about white genocide and kill the Boer because someone had clearly mucked with the code.
Yeah.
And at some point in this, someone asked Grok, like, well, what happened to you?
Yeah.
And Grok gave some answer. And we were talking about this in our editorial meeting. I was like, and people were saying, well, we can't credit the answer. Like, it doesn't actually know.
Exactly.
It's not like, oh, now it's telling the truth. There is no it there to tell the truth. Like, it could be right or it could be wrong, but the impulse we have to view it as sentient is so overwhelming.
It is so overwhelming. I mean, the fact that we can anthropomorphize a rock in cartoons.
Totally.
A rock is not talking to us. So the moment that you have a chat interface that seems to be empathetic, that seems to understand your emotion, I mean, that's even more powerful.
So part of the story of OpenAI, among many stories, is a story of like a kind of classic story of, oh, we're going to do this to save the world. We don't want a profit-driven AI model. We're going to be a nonprofit. And now, like, that's basically all fallen apart, right?
Yeah, completely. I mean, OpenAI is potentially the most capitalistic tech company ever. They just finished raising $40 billion at a $300 billion valuation, and that's the largest fundraise of private tech investment money in the history of Silicon Valley.
So did they changed the structure?
They nested the for-profit arm under the nonprofit, and for a while they called it a capped profit arm because they were capping the amount of returns that investors could get from their initial investment. They've now changed it to a PBC, which is a for-profit arm that is supposed to also have a bit of a social mission driven like around it, but the core difference between what previously existed and what existed now is that there's no cap to the returns anymore.
Who owns it?
Honestly, it's a really great question. And one of the things that I realized through my reporting is whereas Elon Musk is someone who plays legal offense and he just tries to sue everyone and everything in his way, Sam Altman plays legal defense where he creates these such deeply convoluted structures. OpenAI is actually just one example of the different types of structures that he's spun up throughout his career, that it becomes impossible to fully understand who owns what and where's the money flowing and what is the tax situation. And this is something that even employees have mentioned to me, like it takes an army of lawyers to understand what is going on. And there have been moments when employees have felt really in the dark themselves about like what even their rights are as employees, and they have to spend a lot of money on legal services to try and comb through all of the documentation that they get because there's just so many nested entities.
Given that Sam Altman is now one of the most powerful people in the country, which I think it's fair to say, and maybe the world, they're starting to do development with, they just announced they're going to do development with countries. They just announced a partnership with the former Apple designer Johnny Ive today. They say, I mean, again, one of the craziest things, if you listen to the people generating this technology, they're like, yeah, it's definitely going to be the most dangerous thing that's ever hit human beings. Like all of them say that. There's a line in your book, and that was in the excerpt in the Atlantic about, we're gonna have to get into a bunker before we release, artificial general intelligence. We could talk about what that means. Can you just give me a little character sketch of Sam Altman? I find him a very difficult person to get a read on.
You're not the only one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's his shtick, basically.
That is. The thing that was weirdest to me when I was reporting, and everyone that I interviewed, I would ask them, so what do you think about Sam? And no matter how long they had worked with him or how closely they had worked with him, no one could actually articulate what this man believes and what his deal is. And I got to a point where I learned in my reporting to stop asking people, what do you think about Sam? I would be like, what did Sam tell you in such and such meeting? Or like, what did Sam tell you about what he believed in this particular situation? What did Sam tell you to motivate you to do X? And what they would say, what the sources would say, Sam would tell them exactly what that source believed. And what he said changed from person to person based on that specific individual. And so no one really, has but like he is a once in a generation storytelling talent who has a loose relationship with the truth. And he's incredibly persuasive. So he can paint the vision of the future, and he has this really profound ability to understand what people need to hear and what they want, and to frame everything. You join me because I can get you what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And he can sort of kind of say whatever he wants in that meeting because it doesn't necessarily need to be grounded in a reality.
There's also been a series of and this is chronicled in the book, of kind of whistleblowers and dissidents and people who have been really alarmed by the direction he's taken it. Tell me a little bit about who those folks are and what are the concerns they've raised about the trajectory of OpenAI under Sam Altman.
Yeah, so you were saying in the beginning that there's sort of these really dramatically different narratives about AI in dominating discourse today, which is AGI will bring us to utopia or AGI will kill us all. And those, colloquially, they're called the boomers and the doomers, with the boomers being like the positives and the doomers being the negatives. To me, those are actually two sides of the same coin, because both camps believe in the AGI religion, as I call it, like that AGI is almost here, that it's achievable, it's just around the corner, that it's going to be profoundly affecting of society.
Can we just stop there and can you just explain what AGI means?
Okay, AGI refers to artificial general intelligence, and this is an incredibly poorly defined term. The very hand-wavy summary of what people typically describe it as is an AI system that can ultimately do anything that humans can do. But this is a really challenging measure because, what makes humans intelligent is also doesn't have any scientific consensus. And so when you're trying to capture in software something that we don't understand about humans, you end up with lots of different opinions about how to do it, what it should look like, who it should serve, all of those things. And so throughout the decades of AI research and development, all the way from the 1950s until present day, there have been just tons and tons of debates, egos clashing, opinions clashing about these kind of core questions of what AI and AGI ultimately is. The way that OpenAI has specifically defined it is highly autonomous systems that outperform humans in most economically valuable work. And so they've specifically defined it as a labor automating machine.
Mm-hmm.
That is also a really key, important dimension to understanding the truly deeply capitalistic nature of OpenAI.
Yeah.
And also to understanding the trajectory that they're taking as a company. Ultimately, they're trying to build systems that they can sell to CEOs for a lot of money.
To replace humans. To automate human work.
To automate away. Yeah. If they're trying to build systems that outperform humans at the thing that makes people want to pay you, you're no longer going to be paid. They're just going to opt for the AI.
And to your point about the sort of boomers and doomers, the kind of utopians and dystopians being two sides of the same coin, that coin being that this level of generalized intelligence that outperforms human and economic relevant task is achievable and around the corner, is the core faith that unites them.
Yes. And that in and of itself, whether or not artificial general intelligence is achievable and whether it even has a well-defined definition, that is a scientific debate. Like, there was a really great story in the New York Times that was just highlighting this by Kate Metz. And the headline was, "Why We're Unlikely to Get Artificial General Intelligence Anytime Soon." And there was a specific line: "In a recent survey of the Association for the Advancement of Artificial Intelligence, a 40-year-old academic society, more than 3/4 of respondents said the methods used to build today's technology were unlikely to lead to AGI." That's why I call it an AGI religion. There is a faith that people have that's not grounded in scientific evidence that AGI is coming, it's coming soon, it's imminent, and that it's going to be dramatically transformative, either utopia or dystopia. And ultimately, the conclusion that both camps have, both the boomers and the doomers, is because it will have such high consequences for humanity, it has the potential to bring humanity to heaven or to hell, they're the ones that have to control it.
Right.
The boomers are the ones that have to control it. The doomers are the ones that have to control it. Their adherents of their subsects of this religion need to be the ones that usher humanity to the next era.
I mean, I want to take a step back from one of the things that's hard to sort of disentangle is like the myth making and the storytelling and the projections of the future from the actual technology itself.
Yeah.
And I really find this difficult because I do find myself, I feel a little bit like one of those like lame centrists who's like, well, both sides get it wrong. But I do feel that way a little bit about the discourse here, where like there's a certain group of people who are like, this is all slop and schlock and BS and garbage and it doesn't do anything useful. And then there's people who are like, you're going to marry an AI, and like neither of those sort of seem right to me. Like, it very clearly seems like profoundly useful and incredibly impressive and sophisticated technology. It already does stuff that was not conceivable to me 3 years ago. Like it is capable of doing things I did not think computers could do 3 years ago. It has a million different use cases, very obviously, many of which I think are really worrisome for the like human welfare labor market implications. But I guess how do you think about the technology itself independent of the religion and the story and the projections of the future?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's a clear explanation for why there's such a fragmented set of opinions about whether this technology is useful or not. It's because the technology can be highly useful for very specific things, and it can fall apart very quickly for other things.
Yeah.
For example, if you switch out of the English language, it suddenly becomes much more difficult to use and much less effective. Yeah.
And that's because of the data set of English is so enormous that it's trained on.
Yes, and also because most of these companies only do their testing in English.
Right. Yeah.
So they only do their content moderation in English. They only do their refining and tuning and all of these things in English. And they also, like OpenAI will use test cases internally where they will test the model on its ability to talk about AI research topics. So even the topic selection for like the stress testing of their technology
That's very funny.
becomes hyper specific. And so people within the AI world are like, this technology is incredible because everything that it does is stress tested on the things that they need done.
It's so funny because it's funny you say this, because the thing that I have most used AI for is to teach me about AI. And it's actually been pretty amazing at it. Yeah. It's actually the one thing, like I have had a long running sort of self-tutorial about AI with ChatGPT and DeepSeek. And it's been very good. Like, basically I started with like, what's a neural network? I don't understand this. How does this work? And walking me through, and then building up from that and predict. And then, I want you to explain, there's a famous paper in AI that sort of transformed things called Attention is All You Need. And explain this paper to me. Like, I don't have a computer science degree. Like, explain the paper to me. Yeah. And then asking more questions. And it's been amazing at that, I have to say.
You have hit upon the exact use case that is the most, like, if you had to use these technologies for anything, this is like the one use case that it is going to knock out of the park time and time again, because that is exactly what these companies stress test the technologies on. But if you move towards, like a particularly esoteric piece of cultural analysis, I don't know, or like a historical fact of a particular tribe in a certain region of the world that is far from Silicon Valley, like that's when you're going to get some like really wild stuff coming out of the models that has no bearing on reality.
I mean, part of what, at a philosophical level, here's part of what I think we're wrestling with, because it really does stoke profound questions about what human intelligence is. To your point about like the question of whether we have artificial generalized intelligence is in some ways dependent on how we understand what human intelligence is, and that's an unsolved problem. But I want to give an example of an early version of AI that we've all been living with for a long time, that I've thought about many times as a sort of philosophical experiment. And that is the algorithm banks use to detect fraud. Mm-hmm. So what that's doing is it's just scanning a ton of data and it's making predictions. And then when you do something that deviates so much from that prediction, they're like, red flag, right?
Yeah.
So it's just it's scraping a bunch of data. It's building a bunch of models using neural networks that say, oh, this is usually how these people operate. This is usually what their behavior.
Yeah.
And what's always amazed me was how good they were. Because sometimes I would make a purchase where I was like, that was kind of an impulse purchase, and the bank wouldn't flag it. And I'd be like, I thought I had human autonomy and human agency when at a whim I walked into this place and bought this thing. But it turns out that wasn't enough of an autonomous decision to so wildly deviate from what some algorithmic prediction of my behavior would be that it would flag a fraud thing. And then at the same time, when someone once got my credit card and bought like 30 pairs of shoes at a place, in I forget where, like,
they did flag it.
They flagged it. They knew. And so there's something about that that's kind of profound, right? Because I think
what's so funny? Okay, because this, like, I get flagged for fraudulent activity all the time when it's like incorrectly, and this
this means that
so
you're a more fully formed, unique subject and agent.
No,
just a lame, predictable,
walking
what this
automaton. Means.
No, I'm serious. There's a profound philosophical point here.
What this means is that there is a specific profile. I mean, this has been studied for a long time. There's bias embedded in all kinds of AI systems, and they train on certain types of data, and it will work really well when you match that training data.
Right.
But it will not work once you drift out of that distribution, and it's called drift. When you're applying an AI system to something that it wasn't actually intended to be used on. And this is one of the challenges with, this is a challenge with all types of AI systems, but predictive AI systems, as you were talking about with the bank fraud, it is an easier problem to solve because it is a very specific use case. You can stress test it with kind of as much imagination as possible of all the ways that it could go wrong.
And you get definite concrete feedback. Like in every case, you confirm this was fraud, this wasn't fraud.
Yes.
So you go back to the training model and you say, you got this right or you got this wrong. And there's always this definitive, as opposed to like write a paper, right? Like,
yes.
Is it good? Is it bad? Like this is just it's a binary thing. You got it right or wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And the challenge with generative AI, or what people now increasingly call general AI systems, is that they're meant to be everything machines. They're meant to do everything for anyone, but actually they only do some things for some people. And there are people that exist.
That's a great point, right?
Yeah, there are people that exist out of the target audience that are doing things that are out of the target tasks, where everything starts to fall apart.
So if you're a boring Brooklyn dad who just just like lamely goes through his life and he brings his kids to sports and he buys the stuff that he buys, is like you're trained on the target data, then it works perfectly.
And then you're specifically asking about AI, the exact topic that they stress test their models on. Yeah.
Yes,
and it's seamless.
That's right. But if you're a more unpredictable person, or you're not in this incredibly nailed target demo, right?
Yeah, you're not in the societal norm of the society that Silicon Valley defines to be the norm.
Right.
Then things start to fall apart. And it doesn't,
that's a great point.
Like,
this is actually a perfect illustration of that, right? For you to say, I get flagged with this all the time. Like and me to be like, that never happens. Like, this guy knows me backwards and forwards. Like, it does actually kind of perfectly illustrate the point.
Yeah, this is actually one of my greatest frustrations when I'm traveling, because like it's so automated now that you can't tell your bank, no, that was not fraud. Like, allow me to make this damn purchase. Like, I want this thing. And now I just have to carry like 3 credit cards with me at all times to make my purchases.
So this to me is actually a place where we're zeroing in on what I think is sort of an important, again, like middle place, which is that like this idea that it's this sort of panacea that's it's a universal toolkit in all things for all people.
Yeah.
For the reasons you enunciated, A, how difficult it is to achieve that, and B, the fact that like the training data really matters, and what data it's training on and for whom based on where in the distribution, right?
Yeah.
That said, it also just seems clearly the case that from this like labor replacement project, right? Let's say, that's the project economically, which we can talk about the implications of, like, okay, fine. Brief writing. There's a lot of first-year associates in this country. They make a fair amount of money. I mean, not as much as the people above them, but it's a relatively remunerative job. Let's just train it how to do first-year associate work. And that seems like, that seems like it's probably up to that task.
Yeah, 100. So there's a part in the book, I got access to a trove of documents that OpenAI specifically used to detail how the model should be trained and on what tasks it should be trained on. And so there's a part of the book that writes about the thing, and there's literally a line that I quote in one of the documents that says, think about all of the things that people might want to do that are economically valuable, like creating art, writing film scripts, writing emails, summarizing briefs, like, and it talks about all the, and like, think about the industries, and it basically starts listing all of the lucrative industries: entertainment, media, finance. And those are, even as they're trying to paint this as it can do anything, internally what they're actually doing is enumerating a list of the most economically valuable tasks that they want to focus on. And so that is, you're exactly right. Like that is ultimately their stated goal. That is ultimately what they're doing internally. And that is the impact that it will have.
I mean, and that's where we end up, to me, where the thing that seems most likely, and in some ways the most unnerving, is actually building a quite effective white-collar labor automation machine. And what I find pretty unnerving about this, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm actually kind of working maybe on writing something about this, but as we sit here and we look at the last 30 or 40 years of automation and neoliberal trade policy that basically kind of took the country's manufacturing base, the possibility of like a unionized, stable job with a high school degree that you could, support a family and buy a house and maybe go on vacation, right? And kind of destroyed that, and it dislocated people geographically, and it annihilated entire like towns and areas. And as we look back on that 40 years later and we think, maybe that didn't go so well, right? That's like now the new consensus. You got yelled at if you said that in 1999, but now new consensus. At the same time we're doing that, it's like, hey, what if we do that to all the white collar workers too?
Yeah.
Which is the explicit project they're trying to do.
Yeah. And the thing that I'll add, I guess, to go back to your question of like, what do I actually think about this technology is, I don't think it requires this technology to be that highly performative in order for this reality to come to fruition.
You're saying the substitution effects, like the labor automation. Yes.
Yes, because if you are a worker going to the negotiating table and the CEO on the other side and you on this side believe that AI could replace you, even if it can't actually effectively do so, you have no more bargaining power and you're going to get fired and replaced. And we're seeing that already, literally, with companies announcing. I mean, Microsoft just announced that they want to make 50% of their code base AI generated, and then they laid off 6,000 of their workers. They're going to do all the rhetorical maneuvering possible to say those are not correlated, but of course they are. And there are other companies that have been much more explicit saying, we are now entering an AI era. We need to shrink headcount. We need every single team to start increasing their output by using AI tools, and they're doing layoffs at the same time. And there was recently a story where one of these companies fired all the workers and then went, whoops. AI turns out is not that good. Can you guys all come back?
Okay, but see, this is where actually I do think that it's not all just storytelling, right? Like in the end, it is going to matter whether it can do the job or not.
Sometimes, but
don't you think? I mean, like if you're a law firm and you're the one that gets rid of all your first year associates, and then you start producing briefs that like there was a brief famously that was circulating recently that like had a bunch of citations to cases that don't exist.
Yeah.
Like that's a big risk. Like someone's paying you $1,000 or $2,000 an hour to produce work. They're not going to be happy if you do that.
If it's sloppy. Right. So in the labor case, I think there is possibly ability to reverse. Like if you make too early of a call and you try to replace all your workers with AI and then it doesn't work out, you hire back the workers. But there are lots of other things that this hype around AI is driving forward that is not reversible. So, for example, the amount of data centers and supercomputers that are being laid all around the world to power these astronomically large models, once the brick is laid, you can't just suddenly, oops, we didn't actually need that. Let's just delete the data center. It's already there, and it's already changed the way that a country or a town has designed their utility grid. It's changed the positioning of power plants and how they're distributed around the world. It's changed people's access to fresh water resources because these data centers actually need to be cooled with fresh water resources. So that, to me, is actually the most concerning impacts that we're seeing with the current Silicon Valley quest to AGI, is that it's actively terraforming the earth, reforming political alliances, reforming economic structures in ways that will be extremely hard to reverse, even when the bubble pops, if the bubble pops.
It sounds like you think it will.
I think the most likely scenario is that the bubble will pop, but I do not want to estimate how good Silicon Valley is at continuing to perpetuate the bubble with even more intense storytelling. And there is, I think, a very, very narrow path in which the bubble won't pop because of the rhetorical footwork that is done. But that specific path, I think, will be very dangerous.
Karen Hao is the author of Empire of AI, Dreams and Nightmares in Sam Altman's OpenAI. It's a great book. It is out now. I learned a lot from it, and that was really, really, really enlightening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chris.